Are you over 65 or live with someone in this age group? Then this video is essential viewing. Recent studies show that a very common morning habit can dramatically increase the risk of stroke. And worse, most people don't even realize they are putting themselves in danger first thing in the morning. In this video, you will find out what this habit is, why it is so dangerous at this stage of life, and what experts recommend doing to prevent a stroke in the early hours of the day. Stay until the end, because the information you are about to hear could literally save lives. If you're new here, please like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any videos. They wake up, sit on the edge of the bed, rub their eyes, and, almost automatically, the first thing they do is head to the kitchen to make a cup of hot coffee. For many, it's a sacred ritual, a moment of calm before the hustle and bustle of the day. But what few people know, and even fewer recognize as a real threat, is that this everyday habit can pose a serious danger, especially for those over 65. How can something so common be so risky? The answer, although surprising, has a strong scientific basis. Drinking coffee, especially in large quantities or immediately after waking up, can significantly increase the risk of stroke in older adults. To understand why, we must look beyond the surface and explore what really happens in the body upon waking. During sleep, blood pressure tends to decrease, the heart rate stabilizes, and the body enters a state of deep rest. This process is natural and beneficial, but upon opening the eyes, especially in older adults, the body experiences an abrupt transition. The cardiovascular system is forced to react quickly. The heart beats faster, blood vessels constrict, and blood pressure begins to rise. This sudden change can be stressful for an aging body, where arteries are no longer as elastic as they once were, and where plaque buildup or capillary fragility may be present. Now let's add a cup of coffee to that equation. Caffeine is a powerful stimulant of the central nervous system. Its immediate effect is to block adenosine, a neurotransmitter that promotes relaxation, causing an increase in neuronal activity. The result? More alertness, yes, but also more tension throughout the cardiovascular system. Blood pressure can rise sharply, and heart rate can become irregular, especially if the body has not yet completed its natural adaptation to the waking state. For a young, healthy person, this may not be a problem. But for someone older, with a history of hypertension, arrhythmias, high cholesterol, or cardiovascular disease, this sudden stimulation can be the straw that breaks the camel's back. Several studies have shed light on this dangerous combination. Research published in reputable medical journals has shown that the risk of stroke is significantly higher during the early hours of the day. In fact, it is estimated that the highest concentration of stroke cases occurs between 6 and 11 a.m., which coincides exactly with the time when most people consume their first dose of caffeine. These are not coincidences. Science points to a causal relationship between morning stress on the body, increased blood pressure, and the introduction of stimulants such as coffee. But the problem is not limited to coffee. Other morning habits that seem harmless can also contribute to the risk. Getting up abruptly, without allowing the body to adjust, can cause orthostatic hypotension, a sudden drop in blood pressure that can cause dizziness or fainting, or the opposite, a sudden increase in pressure that compromises blood flow to the brain. In addition, prolonged fasting, very common in older people who do not eat well in the evening or who delay breakfast, can cause fluctuations in blood glucose that, combined with excess caffeine, trigger a dangerous metabolic storm. So does this mean that older people should give up coffee altogether? Not necessarily. The message here is not one of alarm but of awareness. The key is moderation, timing, and the individual's overall health. Drinking coffee is not inherently dangerous, but doing so immediately after waking up, without allowing the body to gradually adjust, and without first hydrating properly, can pose an unnecessary risk for those who already have a compromised physiological state. It is advisable to adopt a more careful and conscious routine upon waking up. Instead of rushing straight to the kitchen to make coffee, it would be ideal to spend the first 10 to 15 minutes of the day hydrating with room temperature water, doing some gentle stretching, breathing deeply, and allowing the body to wake up gradually. Only then, when the cardiovascular system is more stable, can it be considered safe to consume a cup of coffee, preferably with food and without excess. It is also important to consult with a trusted doctor, especially if you are taking blood pressure or heart medication, or if there is a family history of stroke. The morning habit that many consider a harmless pleasure can, in some cases, become a deadly trap for brain health. And what is most worrying is that this is not an isolated case or media hype. The numbers, statistics, and clinical studies back it up. So if you are over 65 or care for someone who is, now is the ideal time to stop, reflect, and if necessary, change a habit that, although small, could make the difference between health and tragedy. As we age, the human body begins to show the cumulative effects of of time. Some of these changes are obvious. The skin loses elasticity, hair turns gray, energy seems to decline, but many others occur silently, inside us, in organs and systems that no longer respond as efficiently as they once did. Among all the health risks faced by people over 65, one of the most serious and often underestimated is the risk of stroke. And this risk does not come out of nowhere. It is deeply connected to biological changes that begin much earlier than we imagine. To understand why this age group is more vulnerable, we must begin by looking at the circulatory system. Over the years, arteries lose flexibility. What were once elastic, resilient conduits that carried oxygenated blood smoothly slowly become stiffer tubes, less able to adapt to changes in pressure. This arterial stiffness, known as arteriosclerosis, does not happen overnight. It is the result of decades of exposure to factors such as smoking, poor diet, a sedentary lifestyle, and in many cases, genetic predisposition. The problem is exacerbated by the accumulation of cholesterol plaques on the arterial walls, which narrows the space through which blood must pass. All of this leads to a chronic increase in blood pressure, also called hypertension, one of the leading causes of stroke. But the story doesn't end there. The brain, that complex and vital organ, also changes with age. Starting at age 60, there is a gradual reduction in cerebral blood flow. This means that certain regions of the brain begin to receive less oxygen and nutrients than they used to. This decrease may not cause symptoms at first, but it makes the brain much more vulnerable to any sudden interruption in blood flow, such as during a stroke. An event that in a young person could be reversible or cause limited damage can be devastating in an older person. The body's ability to self-regulate its pressure and maintain balance is also compromised with age. The autonomic nervous system, which is responsible for maintaining constant functions such as breathing, body temperature, and crucially, blood pressure, loses accuracy. That is why it is not uncommon for many older people to experience sudden drops in blood pressure when standing up quickly or feel dizzy when changing position. This deterioration in autonomic control makes the body more susceptible to cardiovascular events, especially in the early hours of the day when blood pressure is most variable. In addition, we cannot ignore the influence of pre-existing conditions. From the age of 65 onwards, the prevalence of conditions such as type 2 diabetes, heart failure, arrhythmias, and high cholesterol increases. Each of these diseases, on its own, is already a risk factor for stroke. When they occur together, a situation doctors refer to as comorbidity, the risk multiplies. An irregular heartbeat can cause blood clots. An artery narrowed by plaque can easily become blocked. A slower immune system may not respond in time. All of this creates a perfect storm that makes stroke a constant threat. And if we look beyond the physical, there are also social and emotional factors that increase vulnerability. Loneliness, depression, and anxiety are common in older adults, and they don't just affect mental well-being. They also have a profound impact on physical health. An older person living alone may be slow to recognize the symptoms of a stroke or even to seek help. Every minute counts in these cases. The lack of a support network or difficulty communicating can turn a treatable situation into a tragedy. Another aspect that aggravates the situation is the use of multiple medications, a phenomenon known as polypharmacy. Many older adults take 5 or more drugs a day to manage different health problems. This combination can have dangerous side effects, unwanted interactions, or even affect blood clotting. Some medications, for example, increase the likelihood of bleeding in the brain, while others can cause dehydration or drops in blood pressure. That is why medical science and public health campaigns place so much emphasis on prevention and constant monitoring at this stage of life. Regularly checking blood pressure, maintaining a diet low in sodium and saturated fats, engaging in moderate physical activity, and getting regular medical checkups are not just recommendations. They are vital measures that can make the difference between living an active old age or facing irreversible consequences. It is also essential to educate older adults and their families about the warning signs of a stroke. Sudden weakness on one side of the body, difficulty speaking, loss of vision, confusion, or severe headache with no apparent cause. Knowing these signs and acting quickly can save lives. But beyond emergencies, we must foster a culture of comprehensive care for older adults, because it is not just about preventing disease, but about protecting their dignity, autonomy, and quality of life. Understanding why they are more vulnerable is the first step in offering them the support and protection they deserve. We live in an age where information is just a click away, but paradoxically, a deep understanding of real health risks, especially in older adults, remains limited. Strokes, also known as cerebrovascular accidents, are one of the leading causes of death and disability worldwide. But did you know that there is a time of day when the risk of stroke rises alarmingly? Recent studies have confirmed it. The early morning hours are critical, and certain seemingly innocent habits, such as consuming caffeine or getting up abruptly, can trigger a tragedy. Science is beginning to speak clearly, and it's time to listen. For decades, researchers have observed a curious pattern. Stroke cases tend to cluster around a specific time of day, Beginning in the 1980s, epidemiological studies began to show that between 6 and 11 a.m. there was an abnormally high incidence of cerebrovascular events. At first, many doctors simply attributed this to chance or external factors, but over time, the accumulation of clinical data, laboratory tests, and more accurate monitoring technology began to paint a much more revealing picture. What was once a suspicion is now a scientific certainty. The human body is more vulnerable to stroke just after waking up. Why? The explanation lies in the physiology of waking up. While we sleep, the body enters a state of deep rest. The heart rate slows, blood pressure drops, and bodily functions slow down to conserve energy. But upon awakening, an almost immediate chain reaction occurs. The sympathetic nervous system is activated. The adrenal glands release adrenaline and cortisol, and blood pressure rises suddenly to prepare the body for the day. This sudden change can be dangerous, especially for people with stiff, blocked, or fragile arteries. A sudden increase in pressure in a damaged blood vessel can lead to a rupture, causing a hemorrhagic stroke or a total blockage, triggering an ischemic stroke. A study published in the American Heart Association journal Stroke revealed that the risk of ischemic stroke is 79% higher in the early hours of the day compared to the rest of the day. The study included more than 20,000 patients monitored over several years and analyzed not only the time of the event, but also their morning habits, blood pressure levels, coffee consumption, and sleep patterns. The results were conclusive. Those who drank strong coffee as soon as they woke up were more likely to experience cardiovascular events within the next 3 hours. Caffeine, the stimulant in coffee, was another focus of the research. It has been shown that in older people or those with high blood pressure, caffeine can induce transient vasoconstriction, a temporary narrowing of the blood vessels, which further raises blood pressure. Combined with the natural increase in blood pressure in the early hours of the day, this effect can overload the circulatory system. And the problem is not limited to coffee. Energy drinks, highly concentrated black tea, and even certain natural supplements can have a similar effect. In other words, it is not just the drink, but the time of consumption and the state of the body that determines the risk. Another worrying finding comes from neuroimaging and brain scan studies. Research using functional magnetic resonance imaging, fMRI, has shown that in older adults, cerebral perfusion, that is, the amount of blood flowing to the brain, is significantly lower in the early hours of the day. This creates a doubly dangerous scenario. On the one hand, the brain receives less oxygen, and on the other, it is under higher pressure. It's like forcing high-pressure water through a fragile, partially clogged pipe. The result can be a rupture or a total blockage. Experts have also begun to talk about the chronobiology of cerebrovascular risk, a new approach that considers how biological rhythms, our internal clock, influence the onset of disease. According to this theory, the human body does not respond the same way to the same stimuli at different times of the day. For example, a cup of coffee consumed at noon may have a neutral or even beneficial effect, while the same amount consumed at 6 a.m. may trigger a crisis for someone who is vulnerable. Given all this evidence, the question is not whether the risk is real, but what we can do about it. Doctors are beginning to recommend simple but significant adjustments: delaying coffee consumption for at least 30 minutes after waking up, hydrating with water before any stimulant drink, avoiding getting out of bed abruptly, and above all, frequent medical checkups to monitor blood pressure, cholesterol, and the condition of the arteries. The use of home monitoring devices is also being promoted, as they can detect dangerous variations in blood pressure during the early hours of the day. Science has spoken, and its message is clear. What we do in the first few minutes of the morning can determine the course of our brain health. It's not about living in fear, but with knowledge, because when we understand the mechanisms of the body, we can make smarter, more careful, and more responsible decisions. And that, without a doubt, can save lives. A stroke can happen in an instant, and that instant can change a life forever. For many, the day begins like any other: a shower, breakfast, a phone call, and suddenly something seems wrong. A word that won't come out, a leg that won't respond, a feeling of dizziness, of confusion, of the body no longer obeying. In those first few minutes, every second counts. Recognizing the warning signs can mean the difference between recovery and permanent disability, between life and death. The tragedy of strokes lies not only in their severity, but also in the fact that the initial symptoms are often minimized, misinterpreted, or completely ignored. Especially in people over 65 who already live with other health problems, it is common for critical signs to be attributed to fatigue, poor sleep, or low blood pressure. But the reality is that the body gives clear signals when the brain is suffering, and it is our responsibility as children, caregivers, neighbors, or simply as human beings to learn to identify them quickly and act without delay. One of the first and most common symptoms of a stroke is sudden weakness on one side of the body, particularly in the face, arm, or leg. This type of weakness is not gradual. It does not warn you. It appears sudden. An arm that can no longer hold a cup, a leg that stumbles for no reason, a smile that becomes asymmetric. When the brain stops sending signals to the muscles correctly, the body responds with an immediate loss of motor function. If someone next to you suddenly cannot lift an arm or drags a leg when walking, do not wait to see if it gets better. This is a major warning sign. Another key sign is difficulty speaking or understanding language. This may present as an inability to form sentences, using the wrong words, or not being able to understand what others are saying. Sometimes the person slurs their speech, or their speech becomes incoherent, as if they were drunk, even though they have not consumed alcohol. This symptom, called aphasia, can be subtle or extreme, but it should never be underestimated. Speech is controlled by specific areas of the brain, and when there is an interruption in blood flow to those regions, the changes are immediate and obvious. Sudden loss of vision in one or both eyes is also common. Some people experience blurred vision, others see double, and still others report partial blindness, as if a curtain had fallen over their field of vision. These visual symptoms, although sometimes brief, are signs that the brain is not receiving enough oxygen. They can last for minutes or hours, but should never be ignored. A sudden change in vision is a medical emergency, not a simple passing nuisance. Severe dizziness, loss of balance or coordination, and difficulty walking can also indicate a stroke. In many cases, the person cannot stand without help or staggers as if disoriented. In others, the vertigo is so severe that it is impossible to move. Although dizziness has many causes, when it appears suddenly, accompanied by other neurological symptoms, it should be considered an urgent warning sign. The cerebellum, which is responsible for balance and coordination, can be affected by a stroke, and damage to it often has serious and irreversible consequences. Sometimes the first sign that something is wrong is a sudden, unbearable headache, especially in people who do not normally suffer from headaches. This type of pain, described by patients as the worst of their lives, may indicate a brain hemorrhage. In these cases, the stroke is not caused by a blockage, but by the rupture of a blood vessel inside the brain. The pain is often accompanied by nausea, vomiting, neck stiffness, or loss of consciousness. It is a critical situation that requires immediate medical attention. To help quickly identify the symptoms of a stroke, specialists have developed a simple but powerful tool, the acronym RAPID. Rostro caído. Se desvía un lado del rostro al sonreír. Arma. Arm débil. Does one arm fall when you try to lift both? Palabra alterada. Is speech slurred, confused, or incoherent? Inmovilidad o pérdida del equilibrio. Is there clumsiness or sudden falling? Dolor de cabeza repentino. Is there intense pain with no apparent cause? Oportunidad. Act fast. Call emergency services immediately. Each letter is a clue, a warning, a call to act quickly. Because in the case of a stroke, time is of the essence. Every minute without treatment means the death of millions of neurons, and every neuron counts. That's why, if you ever notice these symptoms in yourself or someone around you, don't wait, don't hesitate, don't minimize, don't call a family member to ask what to do. Call emergency services immediately. A fully equipped ambulance with trained personnel and quick access to a specialized hospital can mean the difference between a full life and total dependence. Stroke treatments, such as thrombolytics, are only effective if administered within a very limited time window, usually within the first 3 to 4 hours after symptoms begin. Recognizing the symptoms is not a medical issue, it is a human issue. It is taking care of your grandfather, your mother, your neighbor, yourself. It is protecting the brain, which stores our memories, emotions, skills, and identity. Learning to read the body's signals is not just knowledge, it is power, the power to save a life. Waking up is one of the most important moments of the day, not just because it marks the start of our activities, but because it is at this moment that our body undergoes a complex and delicate transition from deep rest to full activity. For most people, especially those over 65, this transition can be a real physiological challenge. As we saw earlier, the risk of suffering a stroke is significantly higher in the early hours of the morning. But what if it were possible to turn this vulnerable moment into an opportunity for care and prevention? The good news is that yes, it is possible. The key lies in adopting conscious and healthy morning habits that respect the body's natural rhythm and protect brain health. And it all starts with how we wake up. The first recommendation from experts is simple but profound. Wake up slowly. Many people, when they hear their alarm clock, get up abruptly from bed, already thinking about the day's tasks. This sudden movement, from lying down to standing up in a few seconds, can cause an imbalance in blood pressure, known as orthostatic hypertension, and in older people, this phenomenon can cause dizziness, falls, or even trigger changes in cerebral circulation. Instead, when you open your eyes, take a deep breath, lie down for a minute or two, then sit up in bed and stretch gently. Roll your shoulders, stretch your arms, and move your neck gently. Only then should you put your feet on the floor and stand up slowly. This seemingly simple ritual allows the cardiovascular system to adjust gradually, reducing the risk of sudden collapses. Another essential step is immediate immediate hydration. After a whole night without fluid intake, the body wakes up in a state of mild dehydration. This condition directly affects blood viscosity, which becomes thicker, increasing the risk of clot formation, one of the main triggers of strokes. Drinking a large glass of water upon waking, preferably at room temperature, helps to wake up the kidneys, reactivate the digestive system, and restore blood flow. Some experts recommend adding a few drops of lemon or a pinch of Himalayan salt, but the most important thing is to maintain this habit daily and consistently. Water is undoubtedly the first remedy in the morning, and coffee. For many, it is unthinkable to start the day without a steaming cup. But as we have seen, for people over 65, especially those with hypertension, a history of stroke or heart disease, coffee should be postponed. This does not mean giving it up complete, but rather respecting the body's natural timing. Ideally, you should wait at least 30 to 60 minutes after waking up before consuming caffeine. During this time, it is preferable to opt for mild teas such as chamomile, fennel, or low-concentration green tea, which offer calming and antioxidant properties without the sudden impact of caffeine on the central nervous system. Next comes the importance of a nutritious and balanced breakfast. Many older people, out of habit or lack of appetite, skip breakfast, but this is a serious mistake. An organism that has been fasting for a long time, waking up with low glucose levels and without adequate energy reserves, is more vulnerable to dangerous metabolic fluctuations. An ideal breakfast to protect the brain should contain light proteins, such as scrambled eggs, plain yogurt, or white cheese, complex carbohydrates, such as oats, whole wheat bread or sweet potatoes, and good fats, such as avocado, olive oil, or nuts. These foods help maintain stable blood sugar levels, nourish the nervous system, and provide satiety without overloading the body. In addition, physical activity in the morning also plays a crucial role. But be careful, this does not mean strenuous exercise right after waking up, but rather gentle activities that activate circulation and oxygenate the brain. A light walk, a series of stretches, or even practices such as Tai Chi and yoga can promote balance, strengthen postural muscles, and most importantly, stimulate blood flow to the brain in a controlled manner. These movements, done with awareness and deep breathing, act as an internal massage for the brain and heart. Another little talked about but immensely valuable habit is that of gratitude and conscious intention. Starting the day with a moment of silence, prayer, meditation, or reflection can dramatically reduce levels of cortisol and adrenaline, stress hormones that naturally rise at dawn. Studies show that people who practice morning gratitude have a lower incidence of cardiovascular disease, greater emotional control, and better sleep quality. And this, in turn, protects the brain. After all, chronic stress is a silent enemy that over time wears down blood vessels, disrupts blood pressure, and increases the risk of stroke. No less important is light and gentle planning for the day. Instead of waking up rushing and immediately diving into obligations, allowing yourself 20 or 30 minutes to get into the groove calmly is a real investment in your health. Avoid cell phones, social media, or alarming news right after waking up. When you wake up, your brain is still in alpha brainwaves, a sensitive, receptive state. Flooding it with stress first thing in the morning creates an inflamed and unbalanced internal environment. Instead, read something inspiring, listen to soft music, or eat breakfast mindfully. This initial slowness may seem like a luxury, but it is actually a biological necessity that the body craves and the brain appreciates. With small choices, it is possible to rewrite the way we start our day. For those over 65, these morning choices are not just lifestyle preferences. They are decisions that protect the brain and cardiovascular system. The good news is that they are not difficult, expensive, or unattainable. They are simple but conscious actions. Hydrate, move, eat smart, breathe deeply, respect your body. It is these actions done every day that reduce risks and preserve what we hold most precious: our autonomy, our memory, our lucidity. Every stroke is a turning point. There is life before and life after. For those who go through this experience and survive, nothing remains the same. The simplest things, such as walking, holding a piece of cutlery, or saying a sentence, take on new meanings. For many, what seemed guaranteed, automatic, and everyday becomes an immense challenge. But this is also where a profound source of learning emerges. Hearing the real stories of stroke survivors is more than an exercise in empathy. It is a vivid reminder that health is fragile, that time is precious, and that taking care of your body should be a priority, never an option. Maria Antonia, 72, from Guadalajara, has always been an active woman. A retired teacher, she loved walking in the park with her friends, gardening, and reading classic novels. She believed she was healthy. Her blood pressure was slightly high, but nothing alarming, she said, until that Monday morning. She woke up feeling slightly dizzy and with a strange sensation in her mouth, as if one side were numb. She went to the bathroom, looked in the mirror, and noticed that her smile was crooked. She tried to speak and couldn't. No sound came out. She thought it was temporary. She sat down. She waited. Only hours later, when she realized that the right side of her body was not responding, did she call her daughter. By the time she arrived at the hospital, almost 5 hours had passed since the first symptom, the diagnosis, ischemic stroke. Maria spent weeks in the hospital and months in rehabilitation. She learned to walk again, to speak clearly, to hold a spoon. She admits that if she had recognized the signs and sought help immediately, the impact would have been less severe. What I regret most, she says firmly, is not taking my body seriously. It was warning me. I just didn't want to listen. This is one of the most repeated lessons among survivors. Listen to the signs. The body doesn't speak loudly, but it speaks with numbness, imbalance, difficulty speaking or seeing. The problem is that many people, like Maria, wait for it to pass. They underestimate the symptom. They think it's temporary. It'll get better, they say. But with the brain, time is everything, and the difference between acting in 10 minutes or 2 hours can mean how much of your autonomy will be preserved or lost forever. Another moving story is that of Don Ernesto, 69, who suffered a stroke shortly after finishing a cup of strong coffee on an empty stomach one winter morning. He was hypertensive and diabetic, but considered himself strong. He worked as a carpenter and rarely went to the doctor. He woke up early, had coffee, and went straight to the workshop. That day, he felt a strange pressure in his head and lost strength in his legs. He fell. He was only found hours later by a neighbor. The stroke affected his speech and motor coordination. Today, although he communicates with difficulty, he makes a point of giving talks in churches and community centers, warning the elderly and their families. Life gave me a second chance, he says, and now I teach others not to make the same mistake I did. Ernesto discovered, like so many others, that prevention begins before the scare, that the body needs healthy routines, not neglect, that going to the doctor is not a sign of weakness, but of responsibility, that controlling blood pressure, eating well, and respecting the body's signals are acts of self-love and survival. But not all stories are accompanied by lamentations. Some are stories of strength and almost miraculous recovery, such as that of Carmen, 67, who suffered a minor stroke while traveling. Having taken a course on brain health a few weeks earlier, she immediately recognized the signs: sudden numbness in her left arm, difficulty speaking, and blurred vision. Alone in her hotel room, she picked up the phone and called an ambulance. Help arrived in less than 30 minutes. She was treated in time, received the appropriate thrombolytic treatment, and was discharged after 3 days. No lasting effects. Today, she volunteers at NGOs that educate older adults about neurological health. Knowledge saved me, she says. If I hadn't learned the signs, I might be in a wheelchair now or worse. What unites all these stories is not just the pain, surprise, or trauma. It is the learning, the recognition that brain health is a silent asset, often invisible but absolutely essential, that life can change direction in seconds, and that there is no time to waste when it comes to the brain. That stroke, while serious, can be prevented, treated, and overcome with awareness, quick action, and support. Listening to these stories, we understand that surviving a stroke is not the end, but the beginning of a new life. There's more mindful life, a slower life, a life that is more respectful of the body, a life in which every gesture, every word, every step has more value, because they have been earned again, because they could have been lost. If there is one thing each of these survivors wants to say to the world, it is, take care of yourself now, while there is still time. Don't wait for your body to scream. Don't wait for collapse. Take care of yourself in the small decisions, in how you wake up, what you eat, how much you move, how you feel. See your doctor, talk to your family, get informed, because the greatest gift you can give yourself and those you love is your full presence. And that starts with daily care, with silent prevention, with listening attentively to the signs that life gives us.